And of course, um, that world is changing so rapidly that nobody even knows what the business models are going to be in the future, right? Who needs a publisher when you've got a bot that can go and find you the information exactly you want? But the problem is this: bots are different. Some have biases, some have flaws, some use a term we don't use, but hallucinate. There are a lot of issues. And so what we were talking about in our conversation was that going forward within AI as pertained to media, one of the most important, perhaps the most important value added within an algorithm is trustworthiness. Mm-hmm. That you know that it's going to make the right identification, and that ultimately the people who are running the thing are going to treat things properly. And it seems to me that as you go in the direction that you're going, which is using facial recognition technology for transactions, you've got to go into it with the mindset of a bank. You've got to go into it and say, we're not just effective, we're not just opening up a new avenue for you, but we're reliable, we are trustworthy, we don't make mistakes. How important is that to the equation?
That is, I mean, you've hit on a couple of the most important things for us in landing some of the big customers that we have landed. Data privacy and security being one of them, but accuracy and bias is another very, very key one. And there's obviously been reports about facial recognition technologies having bias or not treating all ethnicities equally. We've taken this very seriously. We have gone through, we've built our own algorithms and really designed them in a way to address the audiences that we're serving and the diversity and conditions, also the weather conditions and the lighting conditions and everything of what these both indoor and outdoor arenas are like. We've submitted our algorithms to NIST, the sort of National Institutes for Testing. We've also gone through extensive testing with many of our big customers have put us through the ringer. Verizon actually resells this as part of a platform that they have, and their legal and testing and privacy teams took this seriously. Big companies like Salesforce use this at their events where they need to be accurate and show that it works. And so, this is very, very important for us. We've gone through extensive testing. And again, while the 6 million number is not, a huge number, the fact that it's worked that effectively across the, what is it now, close to 1,500 live events we've powered at this point, with, little, if any, incidents at all, is a testament to the accuracy and reliability of the system. But I completely agree with you. It's something we take very, very seriously here.
Well, I certainly didn't mean to suggest 6 million was a low number, and you're way beyond proof of concept, right? It's just, what I was really getting at was that the upside is pretty much unlimited.
No, absolutely. No, and I do think, and that's where I go back to, the Cleveland Browns are great because they're getting 15 to 20% of their fans in on a given Sunday. And then a buddy of mine who is a Browns fan is like, why isn't it 80% of the fans yet? And it's just, it takes time. It takes time for new technology, but we're getting there. The arc is getting there over the last few years.
Yeah, but that gets to another issue, which we talk about here a lot. I'm based in Washington, and so needless to say, there's always a kind of a regulatory public policy focus. And 5 years ago, there was no regulatory public policy towards AI or any of these kind of things. And then over the course of the past 5 years, we've been inundated with plethora of think tanks set up by people in that field and lobbying and all sorts of stuff going on. And we have a president right now surrounded by a lot of people from Silicon Valley. And the next president, regardless of party, is going to have the same experience because people are trying to influence the outcome. Now, the stance which this administration likes to suggest is their stance is kind of light touch, laissez-faire. Leave it to the markets. We're going to get out of the way. Even in the big beautiful bill as that was described in the spring, for a brief time there was a provision in it that was going to say states can't get involved in this. it was going to be a 10-year moratorium on states getting involved in this. Now, it's not exactly true that it's light touch. It's trying to have an impact on, whether there's woke content or not and so forth. And we could get into that. It's not really relevant to what you're doing. What is relevant is that on issues of privacy and data security, either the federal government is going to regulate it, or state and local governments are going to regulate it, and maybe both. And by the way, take it to the next level. National governments will have different regimes. And so what does that lead to? I was a senior trade official once upon a time, and our job was harmonizing standards and regulatory regimes so companies could understand how scalable they were, and they wouldn't have to have legions of lawyers because there were hundreds or thousands of regimes to deal with. We don't know how this is going to go. But for a company like yours, I'm just wondering how you deal with the fact that, one bad incident, one stadium, and all of a sudden the city of Los Angeles or the state of California says, nope, we're doing it a different way. And your argument about how scalable you are changes. And how do you deal with that?
I mean, that's a very existential question for us, David, and it's one that, we obviously monitor and work closely with, or work to closely understand all those regulations as they're coming down. There are, industry organizations that we work closely with that advocate for this technology or try to understand what those regulations look like. Again, knock on wood, so far it's worked well everywhere in the United States. There are absolutely differences from state to state. There's the famous BIPA law in Illinois that is a very stringent Biometric Information Protection Act, and we are operating in Illinois and have had success operating within the constraints of that law. I will say there are some European countries where we tend not to really pursue a lot of customers right now, because some of the governments in some of those countries have come down much more stringently on this for the time being, and it is going to change. And so, it's something that we watch closely. We work with our big customers to make sure that we and they are up to date and complying with, whichever direction the wind is blowing on this stuff. But it is definitely out there and something that, that we need to monitor. We're not the only industry obviously affected by this. There's other industries, outside of AI that also, see government regulation shift over time and impacts their businesses. But it's definitely something that we need to watch and be in tune with.
Yeah, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I did notice on your website, you talk about 99.7% accuracy and so forth, because so it's clearly part of your goal here is
Absolutely.
to build that trust. But presumably, from a market perspective, it's in your interest to operate to the highest standard because that's the one skeleton key into the most regimes, right? Into the most regulatory
Absolutely.
markets, right?
Yeah, no, and that's why even before we had landed our first European customer, we made sure we were fully GDPR compliant, and we are fully GDPR compliant, even though not a lot of U.S. states or institutions are enforcing that for U.S. populations right now. We are now operating in Europe, but we wanted to be there well ahead of that, and so we are trying to, as you say, operate at sort of the highest possible denominator to make sure that we meet those regulations as they change state to state, country to country, regime to regime.
Yeah. For me, it's all causing flashbacks because I remember, back in the trade negotiations in the 90s, there were so many regimes on so many different things from, phytosanitary standards to, to manufacturing safety standard, that it was really, really hard. And as I look at this, I see a lot of companies not focused on state and regulatory or not focused on federal. And challenges are going to be coming. The next few years are going to be turbulent because Absolutely. This is, the Industrial Revolution, let's say it started in 1776 with James Watt's third patent on the steam engine, but it lasted through 1950, right? There was a long time to adjust to it. Yeah. This has taken 180 years and condensing it into a couple of years. And that's, that does produce culture shock, business shock, and must produce management shock. It's like, how do you keep up with that?
Yep. Yeah, no, it's keeping us on our toes. Absolutely. Yes.